Have you ever wondered if some simple skipping around like a 3-year-old can help you race faster? Well, according to an Olympic sprint coach, the answer is yes. I just had a really fascinating conversation with Stuart McMillan. Stu McMillan is arguably one of the most prominent Olympic sprint coaches in history. He's worked with dozens and dozens of Olympians, and he currently works with not only Olympic sprinters, but athletes from other sports who need to work on their speed and their power. Stu knows his stuff when it comes to sprinting and sprint mechanics. I had him on the podcast to talk about how us distance runners can learn from the mechanics of sprinters and hopefully use that knowledge to improve our own running form and our top end speed. And you know what he said? We can get a lot faster just by practicing some simple skips. Yes, skipping. Now, I was a little surprised by this, but I thought back to my running career and I realized this was actually something that I experienced myself. All through high school, I didn't really do much skipping at all. I ran cross country, indoor track, outdoor track, but didn't do a lot of skips. When I went to college, all of a sudden we started doing skips a couple times a week. We started doing regular skips, A skips, B skips, C skips, all kinds of skipping variations. And I realized Stu is 100% right. Skipping is a mainstay in the training programs of high-level runners, even if they are not sprinters. So let's talk a little bit more about this and how you can implement certain types of skips into your training to become a faster, more economical distance runner. Now, before we talk about some ways to add skipping into your training, let's talk about why you should think more about skipping. Not just because I told you to or an Olympic sprint coach told you to, but let's think about what it does to your body. Well, skipping really reinforces having a stiffer spring. If you are running fast, it's a good idea to think of yourself as like basically two pogo sticks. You want to absorb a lot of the forces of running, a lot of that impact force, and then release that energy as free energy through your tendons and holding on to some of that energy in your muscles. Now, we can train ourselves to be better springs. Now, this kind of tightness or tension isn't really the same kind of tightness that we might have after a big long run where we feel a little sore, a little tight the next day. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about promoting efficient joint angles and allowing the body to retain its shape under pressure. In other words, your joints are not going to collapse under the pressure of you running. You're going to maintain that stiffness so that tension builds up in the joint and in your muscles, and then you'll be able to release that as free energy. It's one of the hallmarks of more economical running form. Gotta take a quick break to thank my partners at Ketone IQ. They just started sponsoring the podcast because I've actually been taking a shot of ketones before every podcast episode for almost 2 years. And that's because higher levels of ketones in your blood are going to increase levels of alertness, clarity, and a bit more cognitive quickness. That allows me to have some really great conversations on the podcast where I can be super present. Now, there's also some really great studies and anecdotal evidence showing that ketone supplementation after running can be really helpful for your recovery. I know that some of the best ultra runners in the world, marathon champ Des Linden, and even a Tour de France championship cycling team are all using ketones after their races for extra recovery. Now, if you want to be on the cutting edge of what I think is going to be a revolution in energy, check out Ketone IQ. And they have a whole bunch of great flavors. So there's peach with 100 milligrams of caffeine, peach without 100 milligrams of caffeine. And if you want my favorite, green apple, this is actually empty because I took one before a podcast recording today. So thank you, Ketone IQ, for sponsoring our podcast and several of our YouTube videos. If you want to get 30% off a 6-pack of Ketone IQ in your first subscription order, plus, a free sample pack of Ketone IQ, go to ketone.com/strengthrunning. They're going to hook you up with some goodies. You can test it, see if you like it, and I hope that you are feeling a little bit sharper and recovering better from your runs. Now, skipping also promotes just better coordination of these joints, the ankle, the knee, and the hip. This is very different than if you are running really slowly. And you can see for yourself. You might be in your living room right now. You might be listening or watching to this, walking down the street. I want you to jog really, really slowly and just kind of get a sense for how your legs are moving through space. And then I want you to try a couple skips. Nothing fancy. Let's just skip down the street like a toddler, like your Miss Daisy, as Stu McMillan said on this episode of the podcast. And I want you to get a sense for your ankle, your knee, and your hip. You're going to be keeping those joints a little stiffer. They're not going to collapse under the pressure of you skipping down the street. That's very similar to sprinting. It's dissimilar to slow running. So we want to train the body to be able to hold these slightly stiffer joints so that we can be more economical when we run fast. Now, another thing that skipping does for you is that it trains the nervous system. It really trains your body to produce faster muscle contractions. So instead of slowly jogging down the street or maybe running marathon pace, you're training your body to produce quick muscle contractions. And that is really going to help you train the nervous system, improve the communication pathways between your brain and your muscles so that you can activate those muscles more quickly, because I think it's very helpful to think of running as a power sport. We don't really think of it like that. We think of it as an endurance sport. But every stride, you have to exert a certain amount of power against the ground, and skipping can really help activate the nervous system, reinforce these quick mechanics, and help you develop that economy, which is really gonna help you race a lot faster. All right, so there are a couple different ways of adding skips to your training, and rule number one is let's not overthink this. Most of us adult runners are not skipping at all, so we don't need to come up with a very complex, progression of types of skips and really get too complicated with things. I'm a big believer in keeping things simple to improve adherence. In other words, let's keep things manageable right now so that we get in something and then we can build on that as time passes. So if you want to get started with some skips, let's get started before our faster workouts. Let's start doing, maybe 2 sets of 30 seconds of skipping one direction. You take 30 seconds or a minute of just standing, let your nervous system recover, and then you can skip for another 30 seconds in the other direction. And this is regular old skipping like Miss Daisy, like a toddler or a kindergartner down the street. We don't have to get complicated. You can also start implementing some drills. Drills do include some types of skips. So something like an A skip. That is an example of a certain type of skip that's a little bit more distance running specific. There's B skip, there's C skips. You can do skips where you're alternating legs. We're starting to get a little bit fancy, starting to get a little bit more advanced. If you wanted to play with those kinds of skips, you certainly can. I think playing with this kind of a training strategy is really valuable. Let's not make it complicated. Let's still maintain that, fun amount of playfulness when it comes to skipping. And we're gonna have a little bit of fun. We might be a little bit self-conscious if other runners are going by and we're skipping around before a workout, but believe me, this is training and this is gonna help you be a better runner. Now we can also do what's called shake-ups. Now shake-ups is basically a type of circuit that includes some skipping, maybe a shorter version of a stride, and this is usually done on an easy day at the very end of the run, or it can be tacked on at the end of a workout. That's a little bit more advanced. If that is something that you're thinking about, let's just make sure that you're comfortable with this on an easy run first before you add it to the very end of a workout. And I'm gonna have a link under this video to a whole video on shake-ups. This is something that I did as a college track athlete, and it basically is a combination of some skipping into a short stride with some walking as recovery, and you turn around and you do that again. It's getting the body used to moving quickly, but not necessarily in a difficult way. So you're gonna do some skips, train that nervous system, boom, go right into a stride, not as fast or as long as a normal stride. Again, we're training the movement patterns, we're training the nervous system. This isn't really a speed workout. We're just getting ourselves familiar with the act of skipping and then transitioning into a stride. So I would do this at the end of an easy run, maybe do 4 shake-ups. You can include a little bit of easy running in between each shake-up if you wanted to do it as part of the run, or you could just do your run and then do some shake-ups afterward, almost like a cool down. It's basically like doing some drills and strides after a run, but this is a little bit more formal, and we're using 2 things in one session to kind of order them in a way that's gonna help you improve and progress over time. All right, my friends, that is my ode to simple skipping as a way to help runners get more comfortable with sprinting, with those kinds of mechanics, and that is definitely gonna bleed into your endurance running mechanics and help you become a more economical runner. I'd love to hear from you about this kind of work. Do you include this kind of skipping or nervous system work into your training to help you improve? I'd love to see what that looks like for you. And if you want to check out the episode with Stuart McMillan, it's one of the last couple episodes on the Strength Running podcast. Stu is an absolute legend in the sprinting community, and I really hope that you guys learn from him and enjoy that episode.